Hello and welcome to World History Unit 1, Lesson 2, When. And you may find this title confusing. 8 days a week, right? How many days are actually in a week? And the title will make a little bit more sense as we go through the lesson. Let's start by taking a look at what our lesson objectives are. And so these are things that you're going to want to take note of as you go through the lesson. We want to be able to describe the purposes and evolution of the calendar, recognize time-related terms and how they are used in the study of history, and use time-related terms correctly and in context. That's going to be important as we move through the rest of our history course. So we want to make sure that we get a good handle on all of that now. All right, so as we're starting this lesson, I want you to think about, what do we use calendars for today? What do you use calendars for? And why do you think calendars were developed? So brainstorm for just a minute and think about that. What did people in history need calendars for? So as we start to look at the development of the calendar, thousands of years ago, farmers needed to know when to plant, right? We know that agriculture, and we're going to see as we get started in world history, how agriculture was really important. Farmers needed to know when to plant their crops. They needed to be able to predict the annual floods. We're going to not only see how important agriculture is, but how important the rivers were in creating civilization. So they needed to be able to predict the annual floods. So observant people noticed that some events kept happening over and over again, like the sky changing in a very predictable way. So they began to track these cycles that we call a year, and their careful observations and calculations led to the development of the earliest calendars. The Egyptians were the first people to use a 365-day yearly calendar. They knew that the year is really 365 and 1/4 days, the time it takes the Earth to revolve around the sun, but they used a 365-day calendar for thousands of years. So thousands of years and many calendars later, during the reign of Julius Caesar, a calendar was developed to fix this discrepancy, and so that became known as the Julian calendar. The Julian calendar added a day every 4 years. Just as our current calendar does, it added a leap year. And so this calendar was used for the next 1600 years. Today, however, we use what is known as the Gregorian calendar. The calendar that we use today was adopted in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII, and it was based on the Egyptian calendar, but with the starting point, or year 1, as the date when Jesus Christ was born. And I have a web tour that I will push out to you guys that really goes through a good overview of the development of the calendar and how it evolved. It also talks about some of those confusing things about when the starting point, or year 1, is. So today, most of the world uses the Gregorian calendar for everyday business. Some societies also maintain calendars that reflect cultural events that they consider important. We have a Chinese calendar, a Hebrew calendar, an Islamic calendar. So there's still many calendars, but for everyday business purposes, you're going to see the Gregorian calendar being used for most of the world. So make sure that you know your terms. When you come to class, we'll play some matching games and make sure that we really know these terms. But again, they're going to be important as you complete the rest of your world history course. And so you want to make sure that you have a good understanding of what each of these mean. So for a decade is a period of 10 years. The century is 100 years, whereas the millennium is a period of 1,000 years. So make sure that you keep those straight. We're also going to go over all of these abbreviations and make sure that you know what AD, BC, BCE, and CE are. So lots of different abbreviations there. We want to make sure that you know how to use each of those correctly as well. All right, so in class, we will work through a lot of problems. You might feel like you're in a math class today as we're working through some of these problems. But it's really important that we have a starting point. So if we were going to take a trip, we would get a map. And first, we would locate where we were starting from, right? If we want to make it from the beach, we'd say, all right, here I am. This is my starting point, and this is my destination. How do I get from the starting point to the end point? Well, we do the same thing when we're measuring time. We need a starting point, and this isn't a problem, right? We know today's date, and so we know that that had to come. This is 2018, and we had to start somewhere to get to that date, to 2018. But how did we get there? When did people start counting? We know that people have used different calendars. We went through a little bit of the evolution of those calendars that people used in the past, and they had different starting points, so it gets a little bit confusing. But we also learned that today most people use the same calendar, which measures time from the same starting point. That starting point is when Jesus Christ was born. So AD 1 is the starting point for our calendar, and that means in the year of the Lord number 1. So the letters AD are short for the Latin words Anno Domini, which just means in the year of the Lord. All right, notice that AD goes before the year. That's an old Latin convention, and it's still used today. So anytime you see AD, it's going to go before the number. All right, so AD and CE. These two abbreviations are actually interchangeable. You can use either one of these. So we talked about AD, Anno Domini. And 15 centuries ago, a monk named Dionysius Exiguus invented a system to keep track of the years. The Christian church carried a lot of scholarship in Western Europe, and this monk, Dionysius, used the birth of Christ as the starting point, and the tradition still lasts to this day, so that's where it came from. But sometimes, instead of the letters AD, you might see the abbreviation CE. This stands for Common Era. So it's still the same starting point, just instead of using AD in the year of the Lord, you're going to use CE, which stands for Common Era. All right, so AD and CE are interchangeable. The only difference is that remember that AD goes before the number, CE always goes after the number. So AD 1942 and 1942 CE are the exact same year. You're just using different abbreviations. So CE is written after the date. Remember, AD comes before. All right, so what about everything that happened before the birth of Christ? A lot of things happened before 81, and so what do we do with those? So we date those years by numbering them backwards, beginning from 81. So the year before AD 1 is 1 BC. BC stands before Christ. So notice that BC is written after the number. AD is written before the number. BC is written after the number. All right, so if you take a look up here at the little graphic at the top, it's kind of like we have our math timeline. And it's showing positive and negative numbers. The only difference is that in your math timeline, you have that 0, and then you'll have your positive integers going up and your negative integers going down. However, in our year, we don't have a 0. So it's AD 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then anything before that is going to go BC and count the opposite way. So 3 BC would actually be before 1 BC. All right, also, sometimes you'll notice the letters BCE. This is just like AD and CE, they're interchangeable. So you're going to see BC, which means before Christ, or you may see BCE, which is before Common Era. So remember that those are interchangeable. Both of those are going to go after the number. All right, here's just another facts for you. Did you know? So when historians are not sure of a date or the exact time period that something happened, they will use the term circa, and that's abbreviated with just a C, and it means around or about. For example, we do not know for sure when Joan of Arc lived. Therefore, historians frequently refer to Joan of Arc's lifetime as C, 1412 to 1431. So about 1412 to 1431. So when reading this, you would say about or around 1412 to 1431. So there is a little fact for you what circa means. All right, so like I said, we're going to go through a ton of examples in class to make sure that you have a good grasp of this. But I want to go through one example with you now. So think about how old you are. So let's say you're 12. If you're 12, you're actually in your 13th year of life. So think of a newborn baby. When it's a few weeks old, it's in its first year of life. And then on its first birthday, it's starting its second year of life. But we say that they're one. They're one even though they're in their second year of life. And that's how we number centuries as well. Think about the century. So all the years from AD 1 to 100 are part of the first century. All the years from 101 to 200 are part of the second century. So it can get a little bit confusing, but always think back to how old you are and what year of life you are actually in, and it'll kind of help you to remember how you name centuries as well. So here's some of the practice problems that we'll go through, but just in talking about that century example, for example, imagine you were born in 1992. What century would that be? And that would actually be the 20th century. So if we take that 19 there and add 1 to it, that's how we get our century. So 1992 would actually be in the 20th century. So I hope that helps a little bit and makes a little bit more sense. You can also go through review in your online school, so make sure that you take a look at those flashcards, and they really help you in understanding how the dates should be written, which ones are written correctly, and how to name centuries. So a great resource for you are the flashcards. So make sure that you do that before you come to class as well, and you'll be a pro. And one more resource I just want to make you aware of before you come to class is the timeline. So in this lesson, you're going to be creating a timeline of you. It's really a fun activity, and it really helps you get a grasp on those dates. So the directions are posted here, what you'll find in your class, but you can do that and you can draw out your timeline. That is just fine. If you would rather have an option of doing that timeline online, you can go to readwritethink.org, go to the interactives, and you'll find a timeline tool there where you can do that online as well. So both of those options are available to you. I just wanted to make you aware of that, and I will push that link out in class as well. So that concludes our overview of the calendar, and hopefully gives you a really good base for starting your world history course, as we're going to look at dates as we go through the course. So I hope to see you in class, and we'll do a lot of fun activities together there as well. Bye, everybody.